One thing that did come out of the Italian Grand Prix, as dull as it was up at the front, was the team orders in play at McLaren, where Piastri and Norris were told to swap positions, and it solidified the 2-3 that the team had before they made their pit stops. Well, I mean, the 2-3 was pretty much solidified. It's just that they put the order back as it was before the pit stops. Maybe I should have been a tad clearer on that. But it's generated a lot of discussion online. Mostly laughter, more than anything, because of it being as mental as it was. And if anything, it furthers the conspiracy theories of Zak Brown wanting Lando to win the championship, and McLaren having to keep gift wrapping it for Lando every single race. But as we've seen in the past, team orders aren't exactly new. We've seen them a million times before as drivers have been told to hold position or let their teammates through for various reasons. Whether that's because of a problem on one of the cars, the championship fight, or simply because one driver is the undisputed number one and gets priority, either way. It's happened so many times before, and this is not the first time this has happened, nor will it be the last. One of the most famous instances of team orders is the "Fernando is faster than you" message that Rob Smedley sent to Felipe Massa during the 2010 German Grand Prix. And that was blown up in the way that it was because when that message was sent, team orders that interfere with the result of a race had been illegal for 8 years. The reason being that in the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix, Rubens Barrichello had been told to move over for Michael Schumacher at a Grand Prix where Rubens had been legitimately faster than the Michael all across that weekend. Rubens was going to win on merit, but the Ferrari pit wall had other ideas. And one thing I remember from the whole Fernando is faster than you thing is that after the race, Eddie Jordan was speaking up on how much of a disgrace that it all was, and he was being called a hypocrite because he'd used team orders in the past, most notably at the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix. But for Eddie though, his situation was slightly different. This race is the one where most of the field had crashed out in one way or another. 13 cars were wiped out at the start of the Grand Prix, a clip that you will see on repeat before every Belgian Grand Prix weekend. But in the mayhem, things had aligned in such a way that the Jordan cars of Damon Hill and Ralf Schumacher were running first and second, and Ralf was running a bit faster than Damon. So Eddie had a decision to make. Mugen was on his back because up until that race Jordan had only scored 12 points all season, and up to the British Grand Prix, they hadn't scored at all. Benson and Hedges, meanwhile, the title sponsor for Jordan, was also miffed because they were forking out a lot of money to pay Damon's wages and they weren't seeing much of a return on their investment. Since the story of 1998 beyond McLaren versus Ferrari was Jordan managing to sign a world champion. So Eddie made the call. Damon had made that famous radio transmission saying that if they raced they could end up with nothing, but contrary to what some people think, Damon was not saying that he'd intentionally wreck Ralf if they raced. The problem was with the conditions. Even simply letting Ralf by could cause a problem. The other Schumacher had hit Coulthard in a similar situation already. Ralf going up the inside into a corner could result in a collision. So Eddie made the call, and the team finished 1-2. For Eddie, feelings were irrelevant. This was business. But in the 50s there were situations where drivers could give up their actual car rather than positions to help out their teammates. In the 1956 season finale at Monza, Juan Manuel Fangio was driving for Ferrari, and during that race he started suffering from mechanical issues. Fangio had to outscore Stirling Moss to win the title, and if he didn't finish the race, Moss would win the world championship. So things were handed over to the team, and they called in the car of Fangio, seemingly to retire, but with Fangio came his teammate Peter Collins. And the decision played right into Fangio's hands. He got back out onto the track and managed to finish the race in second place. Moss had actually won and took 9 points for the victory, but behind, Collins and Fangio are both recorded as being in second place, since they shared the car rather than the entry. A bit like the Indy 500, come to think of it. It's the car that qualifies, not the driver. But either way, Moss got 9 points for the win, but the 6 points for second were split in half, 3 for Collins and 3 for Fangio, which meant that Fangio got fewer points for second than Flockhart did for third, which sounds completely mental today. But as a result of this team order and act of sportsmanship on Collins' part, Fangio won the World Championship by 3 points. His 5th championship at that. And an honourable mention goes to Valtteri James as well, which was Mercedes calling off a battle for the lead on a slick track. And actually, with Fernando is faster than you, Alonso was on for the championship, so it made sense to do so, even if it was against the rules. So for McLaren, how did they end up in this situation to start with, and why is everybody laughing at them for it? It all happened around the pit stop cycle. McLaren had gone a lot deeper than others into that race, with the exception of one driver, I think it was Gasly, who pitted right on the last lap due to the team simply forgetting about the 2-tyre rule. Verstappen had already pitted and was already out in front and ahead, leading the Grand Prix, with the Red Bull finding some pace and balance that has, well, been a premium this season. But behind, the McLarens were left scratching their heads and would look to the strategies instead. But that didn't work. Clearly. McLaren's policy is that the lead driver gets priority when it comes to pit stops. In this case, it's Lando, and Lando can decide to pit first or let Oscar have it instead. And there isn't a perfect strategy for every track. It depends on circumstances like clean air, tyre warm-up and other factors. You can undercut and overcut at Hungary, for instance, although an undercut might be better for gaining positions. And Monza isn't a track where the tyres take a hammering, so you can do either or really. I really need to read up more on it and do a video on that kind of stuff because it is interesting. Other teams have a similar strategy policy, but this can be overridden if circumstances dictate, like one driver being stuck in traffic. But because McLaren went so deep on their tyres during that Grand Prix, this policy, if you want to call it that, went straight out the window. So what happened was McLaren pitted Piastri first instead. This being because Leclerc was behind Oscar, and in the opening stages of the race, Oscar and Charles had been locked in a battle, with Oscar doing an absolutely stone-cold move around the outside into the first Lesmo. Because Leclerc had already pitted and was on fresher tyres, McLaren decided to pit Oscar first and cover off the Ferrari, which makes total sense. With Verstappen in control, there wasn't much they could do to win the race, beyond having a safety car call late on that allowed them to get a free pit stop and challenge on the restart. But Verstappen would have likely pitted too, although I think the McLarens might have had a tyre advantage. And as the race said in their analysis, 2 cars were out of the race already, and there had been a couple of iffy collisions at the same time. So there could have been a safety car at some point. There just wasn't. McLaren was gambling on something that never came, and Red Bull have been left in that position a couple of times this season. But that's the nature of Formula 1 sometimes. For McLaren, as it has been for Red Bull already this season, this waiting for a safety car thing becomes a less than fruitful endeavour. But when Lando pitted, his pit stop was slow, so he emerged from the pits behind Piastri. After this, McLaren ordered the 2 drivers to swap positions, something that has baffled and entertained in equal measure. Because it's not like the championship is close. And by that I mean it's not close between 2 different teams. I.e. this isn't Hamilton versus Vettel in 2018 for instance, where we had Valtteri, it's James. This isn't one guy at one team versus a guy at another team, this is 2 teammates fighting for the World Championship. This is more Hamilton versus Rosberg instead, and McLaren is switching drivers about like Lando is in a tight battle with Verstappen or Leclerc, and needs to do damage limitation or extend as much as possible given the circumstances. And McLaren doesn't really need to faff about with any of that stuff. This papaya rules thing does make sense, race each other but don't have each other off, but that's rule number 1 of racing. Don't hit your teammate. McLaren are well out of sight in the constructors. The gap to Verstappen is significant enough in the drivers that they should be fine. It's totally unnecessary. I think McLaren can secure the championship at Baku, but my maths is likely to be a bit off. And Lando has actually said that there's been no discussion as to whether the gloves can come off once the constructors has been secured, or that Oscar might be prioritised once the constructors has been secured. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. But one thing I do need to point out here is that over the course of that particular race, Lando had actually been the faster driver. So in that instance, I guess it does kind of make sense. If Lando had made a mistake like Oscar had done at Silverstone for instance, then swapping them back would have been worse for PR. A lot worse. And at that point, you actually would have a case for Lando being favoured. In this instance, the pit crew made the mistakes. And mistakes happen. If Lando had run over his jackman, like Schumacher when he punted Nigel Stepney into the next postcode, then sure, that's on him. But it was one of those things. People make mistakes, and that's on the pit crew rather than the driver. And like mentioned, Lando had been the faster McLaren in that race, so status quo is the, for want of a better term, fair way of doing things. But for a lot of people, they don't want to be seeing that sort of thing because it kind of, ruins the spectacle from a TV point of view. A guy called Stephen C. Taylor wrote in the comments section of an article by The Race that while he admired the whole culture of honesty, transparency and sportsmanship at McLaren, maybe they took it a tad too far in this particular instance. Now, I am paraphrasing here, but he said that trying to artificially balance out the fortunes by getting the drivers to mitigate the mistakes of 1 or 2 members of the pit crew didn't sit well with him, and the team should have recognised that it wasn't the undercut that lost Lando second for a brief period. It was the iffy pit stop. He then went on to say that this is all part of racing and McLaren should stop trying to be so fair all the time, because we, as the viewers, want to see the teammates go at it to see who is the better driver, as we've had in previous seasons with Hamilton and Rosberg, Prost and Senna, and Jim Clark and Graham Hill. Another person, called Tom, wrote that the irony is that the pit stop sequence was inverted to protect Oscar from a distant undercut, and the reason you do that is in case the stop is slow. Now, you have the masses thinking that McLaren is openly favouring Lando for something they were protecting Oscar from. On the 3 laps prior to Oscar's stop, Leclerc was between 0.5 and 0.7 seconds faster. Had Oscar gone the extra lap and then had Lando stop, he would have emerged behind the Ferrari. And actually, I scrolled down one more comment and it was the usual damaging Piastri for Norris stuff. It does have to be said though that Oscar wasn't exactly impressed with this. He said that he thought slow pit stops were just part of racing, and he didn't get why the situation was now different, but he did it anyway. When the switch happened, Lando kept his gap. Would he have caught and passed Oscar normally? Answers on a postcard. But it is a baffling situation, because there are reasons for and reasons against. Reasons for, McLaren wasn't going to win the race because their gambles on a late race safety car didn't pay off, so resetting the positions is a doable thing in this situation. Reasons against being that this wasn't driver error that put Oscar back in front. It was a mistake in the pit stops, and that has nothing to do with Oscar or Lando's performances on track. And it's just one of those things. In addition, it sucks from a TV audience point of view because people want to see it play out naturally. And if one driver gets unlucky, then so be it, as we saw last time out at Zandvoort. That's sport, and it's not always fair. Now obviously McLaren isn't going to have to take this to the extremes that some of the memes have been suggesting that they will with all of this. You know what I mean. Oscar will have to have a dodgy oil system to make up for the one that Lando had at Zandvoort. Oscar will have to crash his car to make up for Montreal, and Lando will have to get a penalty to even things out for Silverstone. Or Lando will have to take a trip through the grass so that Melbourne is evened out as well. Then there's the strategies. Lando got the, in inverted commas, wrong strategy at Spa, while Oscar got it at Hungary. In this instance, they're actually even. But as one article here says, there's too many variables. Sometimes luck is going to screw one of them, and it was Lando at Zandvoort and Lando again at Monza. But Andrea Stella reiterated this whole thing of fairness to autosport the other day and consistency of principles. But like many have mentioned and will be keen to mention in the comments of this video, sometimes the RNG gods go against you, and you've just got to deal with it. Martin Brundle would call it the rub of the green. David Coulthard would say, it is what it is. And Stella even admitted that this should not have led to a swap of position, and that they were anticipating Oscar coming out in front of Leclerc and Lando coming back out in second. But because of the slow stop, they had to swap them over in the balance of fairness, and because that lined up with their principles. But like I said, I'm sure you've got your own opinions on it. But will it harm McLaren in the long run? I don't know, that's another question entirely. Oscar only lost 3 points to Lando out of all of this. The gap is still 31 points, and you'd have money on Oscar to do well again at Baku where he won last season. Okay, yes, rear wing, but he still won. 3 points isn't a lot now, but later? Who knows? This has definitely been an embarrassing moment for McLaren, and if the season had seen more competition from Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, then McLaren wouldn't be looking anywhere near as good as they are right now. Because with all that competition, you can't afford to play nice and be a nice happy family. There's a championship to win, and unless you're Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart or Jenson Button, you don't win championships through being nice. But I guess Oscar does have the proverbial Uno reverse card in his back pocket now. If he gets a slow stop at a future race and he loses a position to Lando, he can play it and get his position back. But one thing that hasn't been considered here is, what if this happens at Abu Dhabi where the championship is on the line? I guess that's where the issues come in. If Oscar does have a slow stop, they'll have to ask Lando to move over, even at Abu Dhabi, as much as they shouldn't have to. But while it's news now and everybody's talking about it, it'll all blow over. I don't think it will have any end of season ramifications to it. Now while in theory it shouldn't really have to happen, and this whole interests of fairness and driver equality thing is a little bit too far, with it having to be discarded entirely when the other teams catch back up, it's hardly the crime of the century. It's not like one driver was genuinely faster all weekend to then be screwed out of it in the final 100 yards or so of the race, like Barrichello was in 2002. Although there was the photo finish at Indianapolis 2002 that was seen as the payback for it to, make it fair. It'll all blow over and we'll have moved on to the next thing soon enough. The only way I can see this really biting McLaren in the arse is if the championship will need to be settled at Abu Dhabi and this situation happens again. Precedent says they'll have to swap. McLaren's own ethics will say they'll have to swap. But what if, in doing so, the championship is decided? Then we'll all be screaming race fixing, and that Oscar was shafted for Lando, or Lando was shafted for Oscar, and the Twitter fan bases are going at it once again. If Oscar can keep more than a 25-point lead for the next 6 races, he'll have the championship win in Qatar. So there is that, I suppose, and I think he can do it. He's definitely got the ability to do so, and he'll be a very worthy champion if and when he does win it. If only to see if he actually becomes animated. But then again, it will still kick off the whole he won despite racing against his team as well as his teammate, but that stuff's never going to end, is it? So then, a look at the McLaren Let's Play Happy Family moment at the Italian Grand Prix and the for and against stuff that comes with it. If this has been an interesting look at things, then do by all means give the video a like so I know I did a good job, and for more stuff like this from the channel, get subscribed and also get that bell on so you never miss out on anything else that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the mad lads over at Patreon who continue to support me at a more personal level, and if you want to help with the picture purchases or otherwise keeping the lights on around here, there'll be a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and any other bits and bobs you might want or need to know. Or the super thanks for any one and done donations and memberships so you can do Patreon but without the Patreon. So until next time, I've been Adam Maud, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.